Grab your cocktail and get ready for this episode of the Old Fashioned Masonic Podcast. Welcome to the Old Fashioned Masonic Podcast, where we talk all things Freemasons while drinking an old fashioned. I'm Brian, and it's my pleasure to introduce another non-Kansan, but guess what, folks? It's not another damn Texan on here. I know that you guys, all of our Texas followers, you're like, oh, he's one of us. Kind of, but not really. But it's my privilege to introduce Eric BenSalah. Eric, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me on. I'm really looking forward to this.
All right. So we're going to talk about why he's got such a cool setup. And we'll get into that a little bit later. But as everyone knows who watches the Old Fashioned Masonic Podcast, we like to know as much about the man as we do the Mason. So Eric, tell our viewers, who's Eric BenSalah?
It's a bit of a weirdo, for starters. Yeah, right. I've been playing drums for almost 30 years. I started when I was 12, but I really started taking it seriously when I was about 14. I played in University of Nebraska marching band for 3 years. Got to go to the Rose Bowl even my freshman year,
Nice.
like whole big deal.
Nice.
So drumming is a very big part of my life. Outside of that, though, I do read a tremendous amount. I love to read science fiction. I also love to read about philosophy. David Foster Wallace is my favorite author. Music has been a big part of my life in general, music and reading. My mom was a professional singer. My dad is from North Africa and was very big into like rhythmic music. So I was pretty much around ever since I was born. But I have two little dogs. I have a Frenchie and then a Frenchton, a mix between a Frenchie and a Boston Terrier. Pretty interesting mix, to be completely honest with you. Her name's Waffles and the other one's Flapjack. So but I've been married for a little while here, and I'd like to do a lot of different things. I'll do whatever. I love to have like really good conversation about what it means to be a human being with my friends and whatnot.
Yeah.
At least I do. I don't know how much they do sometimes, but I go for a lot of walks. That's a thing. I hike a lot, a tremendous amount.
Is that from a meditation aspect as much as anything, right?
Yeah, it's nice. Like there's a really good book, The Philosophy of Walking, that like I've already was used to walking a bunch, but then when I read that, I was like, there really is something to walking that much.
Yeah.
Now I don't call myself a Buddhist, but I do practice Zen Buddhism a lot, quite a bit. So that is another part of me. I like Husker football. So all the Texas people probably will absolutely love that. But yeah, I mean, I just kind of everything, a little bit of everything. I just like experiencing life. I really enjoy it. So I'm happy to do just about anything except watch reality TV.
I like it. Okay. All right. All right. So those who saw the thumbnail coming in, he can pound it out on the drums. And let me just tell you, this isn't your drum line. This is a full kit. This is set up. And check out the link above. We're going to send you over to his channel. It's wild. He can rip some stuff apart. Talk to me about this kit. This thing is massive.
Yeah, I do have a pretty large kit. I've had a large kit probably since I was about 18 years old, I think, and I'm 42 now, so for quite a while. And a lot of it is because you kind of start accumulating things as you don't move around a whole lot. I played in bands. I was in a band when I was like 15 and then one in my early 20s and stuff like that. And I've recorded records and whatnot. But I guess to me, it's like, and I've had some other drummers that'll say, oh, you got too much stuff going on. You just need to keep it small and keep it simple. And I'm like, well, would you tell a guitarist to just have one or two strings?
Fair.
Like it's their voices, everything's got its own place. And especially with the videos that I do on YouTube, not necessarily like when I'm covering something, but when I do what I call my interpretations, where I take like soundtrack music or something like that, and I write my own parts to it.
Right.
I want to be able to have different parts that sing to different aspects of the music itself. So, and being such a big person, I'm 6'3", 210 pounds. Like I could easily overpower a small area. So it's kind of nice to have all that stuff, but it's really, you kind of feel like you're sitting inside of a little bit of a like musical spaceship. It's kind of fun. And it's basically it's inside this black thing right here.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that makes sense with your size because you got the reach too, so you can that clears up some questions that I had in my mind as I've watched some videos.
Yeah. Yep.
So that's the personal side of Eric.
Mhm.
Let's talk about your Masonic journey from where you started and where you're at now. And then we'll talk about where you're going.
Okay, sure. So I had something that actually happened to me. I had some sort of epiphany of some sort. It was late October 2013. I was on a Ferris wheel at a music festival in Las Vegas.
Aren't we all?
And yeah, that's right. It's just a very normal place to be.
Very normal.
And I was with my wife, and I was looking out over the high Nevada desert, and it was at night, so it's just black out that way. But then like down here, there's thousands of people watching Imagine Dragons. I'm not a fan of them, but it was whatever. Everyone's there to have a good time. And something just clicked inside of me that I felt something. I don't know exactly what it was, but I had actually gotten really inspired into like trying to find out more about life and about the human condition.
Yeah.
And so that's where I started shifting into like philosophy and psychology and maybe some of like the esoterics and Western mystery tradition. Now there's a store here in Omaha called Next Millennium, and I used to go there all the time to like get books and see and just learn about all this, esoteric stuff. And the owner always had shirts that had like the square and compass on it with some, lodge thing. I mean, I could kind of make out what it was, but I didn't know what I was really looking at. But
right.
After a couple of years of buying books that were written, some by Masonic authors, he finally said, have you ever thought about joining Freemasonry? I was like, no, man. I was like, I'm not a group person. I'm not really interested. I was like, but thanks though. And like, just went about my way. And
that's more for the guitar players. You're the front guys. I like it behind the chair. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm back here just doing my own thing, man. But no. And then I think it was something like maybe about a year or so later, he got at me again. He's like, really? He's like, you buy all these books. He's like, I just think, he's like, you haven't thought about it? I was like, no, not at all. And he's like, well, what if I give you a book that you could read and maybe then you could make a decision? I was like, oh, okay. I was like, now you're speaking my language. That sounds pretty sweet. And he's like, well, come back tomorrow. I'll get you a book. I'm like, sweet. Yeah. So I go back in and I'm really excited for this. And he comes out with Freemasonry for Dummies.
Okay.
And I was actually like massively let down because I was like, oh, like I thought I was going to get this really neat,
right.
like
this old book that you're blowing the dust off. Yeah.
No. And so I was like, okay. And I'm like, all right, fine. You know what? I don't know. So I take it home, and I think I got through like maybe 1 or 2 pages. And there was a part in there where like the guy said that like there's nothing mystical about Freemasonry. And as somebody at the time that was heavily into like the mystical stuff, I kind of was like, well, my first thought was like, well, maybe actually I don't want to know about this.
Yeah, it's kind of a buzzkill.
A little bit. And I was like, I don't want to read anymore. And so I set it down. I talked to my wife a little bit, and my wife is very much this is her answer to a lot of things. Just do your thing, man. Just whatever you want to do. That's fine. And I decided, I was like, you know what? Sure. Why not? It can't be that bad. And the idea that I had going into it, when I went back and talked to him and I said, you know what? I will. He gave me a petition, all that stuff. And he was like, did you read the book? I said, no. I was like, I think I would prefer to just experience it as opposed to like have any sort of insight as to what this is going to do.
Okay.
Or what this is going to be like. I didn't want a spoiler, I guess.
Fair.
I never Googled Masons, and like I had read some books about like how the Masons were the Illuminati and all this stuff. And I knew that, that was BS, but
you got to be 30 years in for that. Everybody knows that.
But, right. Yep. And even if you're Grand Master, you're still not the highest part.
You're not high enough rank. Yeah.
Definitely not. So, but then, so July ended up being, so that was back during the days where we were what is commonly referred to as short form. Our short form back in the day did not have the obligation. It was something you could memorize in half an hour. And so it was like 3 weeks. And then the business meeting, you would do your Master Mason prove up and you're a Master Mason.
Okay.
Now, during this time, so it was July 26, 2016 is when I became a Master Mason.
Okay.
I still, to this day, keep very detailed notes in a journal. That's the best way for me to remember truthfully how my life has been.
Sure.
And in my journal, I said, Am I allowed to cuss on here? I don't know if
Do
that's
whatever you want.
all right. I said, my journal literally says, I am now a Master Mason. I have no idea what the fuck that means. And that was the
But
problem.
how many of us think that in our minds? Like, okay, now what? What?
Yeah. And that made me wonder, is like, is it just me? Has everybody else kind of had the experience? Because the experience itself, each degree that I went through, I was like, holy cow, this is amazing. This is incredible. But I don't know what happened.
Yeah.
And so, it's like EA's done. We're doing fellowcraft. Oh, okay. So we went on and did that. And it's like, by the end of it, I was like, okay, now what? And then I would go, I'm like, okay, well, for me, I got to involve myself. So I started learning some of the work. I learned the steward's parts and then the junior deacon's part before the end of the year. And I'm like, well, this is how I can do it. And then I can get in a chair and I can work my way up. Well, the guy, incoming master, had no interest and just kind of like let me drift off. And I was like, well, this is no fun. And so I quit going.
Yeah.
And I was like, all right, I paid my dues, but I was like, I ended up befriending a guy that was one of the senior stewards at the time for my degrees. And him and I instead would meet on lodge night together and talk about Masonry, because we both were like, the lodge wasn't giving us anything we needed. And did that for a while. But then by the end of the year, the guy that's going to be Worshipful Master for 2018, he's like, I don't have a line. Can you guys help me? And we're like, yeah, we want to do the work. So got in as senior deacon, jumped quite a bit, got in as senior deacon in 2018, moved to senior warden in 2019, then master in 2020 and 2021. So I did 2 years as master. And in 2021, our lodge actually won Lodge of the Year for the first time ever. Oh, wow. And so that was a huge, big change for that lodge, was kind of turning things over and really kind of shaping, because we started thinking about my lodge is John J. Mercer Lodge number 290. And so we started thinking, what's the Mercer experience? What's the experience that we can give the guys that are coming in?
Right.
And so creating that, and I had a partner, and I think that's really important at Masonry. I think people miss that sometimes. Is like, it really helps if you have somebody to do this with.
Yeah, your battle buddy.
That's a good way of putting it. Yeah, your battle buddy. So him and I, we had just basically decided we're going to reshape what Mercer looks like. And we started doing that back in 2019. And then 2021 was also the year that I got appointed as a Grand Lodge officer for the first time. I was Grand Junior Steward. And I love Masonry. It's my thing. It is my jam. Yep. I do so much. And like, so being able to travel and go all over the place, it's a lot of fun. So in 2021, I had kind of a banner year, had a bunch of things going on, but I also learned our ritual front to back. So our whole cipher and the monitorial stuff, all of it. Okay. Got my individual proficiency and whatnot, because I wanted to be able to go out and help. And I thought also too, like I said, with like getting in line helps to understand and what this means.
Think about anything. Once we're able to teach it, we know it better.
Exactly. Right? Absolutely. And I hadn't even, with my job of teaching students about energy, hadn't even started that yet. But this was my way of like, if I learn this and I start giving these lectures and teaching these lectures, especially things like the middle chamber, it's like, it's almost as much for that guy as it is for me.
Yep.
And so that was a big reason why I ended up learning to work. And plus I had COVID time to like learn, because we weren't doing anything for a while.
Great point.
So that happened. And then 2022, I ended up moving over to secretary. Worst decision of my life. But I did it. Unfortunately though, it was a little bit of a scary, busy year. So we had the Nebraska All-Star Masonic Marching Band. Okay. And we had that for about 26 years. Now, in 2021 was the last year that our office manager, who had been with us for 20 years or something like that, and she's the one that used to do the band camp, she got another job. And so now all of a sudden they're like, well, we don't know what to do with band camp. And they're like, well, Eric's got a lot of band history. You know, he can do it with the committee. And I was like, I had no idea what that meant. I was a chaperone in 2021 for band camp, but I was like, sure. Okay. And it was more like, hey, Eric, will you help us? Will you do this, please? And so I had in band camp, essentially. So I helped put on band camp. I had a committee, but it was a part-time job on top of the job I already have, on top of my Grand Lodge stuff. And I don't know, my wife and dogs
being a husband, right.
You know, all that stuff. So, but it was at its peak, it was roughly 30 hours on average a week on top of everything else I was doing. So it was quite the thing. Now, rewarding for sure. I had a wonderful time doing it, and the kids are amazing. Like, I had such a great time doing it, but it was a lot for somebody that's already working a full-time job.
Yep.
And so rest of 2022 goes on, and we do pretty well. We had a nice year. Mercer's now got this, basically got a kind of a template of like, this is when we do this, when we do
plate
this.
spinning.
Yeah, it's simple. It's like you plug and play. The next guy comes in, puts his little flavor to it, but we already have a template.
Right.
And so we ended up winning Lodge of the Year again. 2023 hits, and then I get some real work. So 2022, I was Grand Historian, so I was kept for another year. And then 2023, that Grand Master, he was like, "Can I have you be Grand Marshal?" So now I'm in charge of cornerstones and lodgery dedications.
Oh yeah, all eyes on me in that position. No hide behind drums.
So he's like, I saw how you did band camp. I figure you can get us organized for this kind of stuff. I was like, yep, I've got some experience on that. So on herding cats, basically. But then I had band camp again. So the first 6 months of the year gave me gray hairs. I revamped how we did the committees and stuff like that. And the year went really well. It was my second year as secretary, but I actually found a replacement. I was able to get away from being secretary.
Oh my gosh.
I know it's the very strangest thing, but I had a guy stand up and said, that's the way that I can serve the lodge the best. And I'm like, you're hired right now.
Yeah, no takebacks.
No, not at all. So, but I should back up a little bit. In 2022, so in our lodge, we have a Rainbow Girls Assembly. And because we do, if you're Worshipful Master, you're automatically on the advisory board for that. Okay. So I served as master a couple of years, and then in 2022, I reached out and said, hey, I'd like to take on a little bit more of a role. I really enjoy working with the youth, and they're like, how about being Rainbow Dad? And I was like, no idea what that means, but okay, sure, why not? I try not to think about decisions. Yes, let's just do that. Yeah. So still Rainbow Dad, by the way. Okay. So that one lasted longer than secretary, but it is a lot of fun. Like, it's been wonderful, and I actually ended up serving. So in 2023, I ended up getting appointed as state Rainbow Dad. So I served as the state Rainbow Dad for Nebraska for International Order Rainbow for Girls. Apparently, I just don't know how to say no to things.
I'm picking up on that.
So, but unfortunately, toward the end with band camp, I did reach out to the Nebraska Masonic Foundation, who is in charge of, like, financially in charge of the band camp, and I said, hey guys, this is my last year doing it. I can help train whoever you find somebody, but you might have to think about paying someone to do this, because it's a big load to handle. I mean, it's a decent sized budget. It's a budget not terribly far off from the budget I use for my education program at the job I get paid for.
Right, exactly.
So, but I let them know early. It was about April. I told them, I said, hey, this is going to be my last year doing it. I'm happy to work as an advisor, but I can't do this again. Like, this is, I have no time anymore. Yeah. So, so that was the first time I said no. It's like, I was learning how to do it, but the year goes through, but something happened in 2023 that got me here. And this might be a nice segue into the next question, but we had a Grand Lodge officer. He was Grand Senior Warden, and he actually ended up stepping out. He said, excuse me, he just didn't have, more or less, there wasn't enough gas in the tank to really keep doing it. And instead of just slogging through and just dealing with it, which I really admire somebody for being like, you know what, this is, I got to get
just
out.
Chasing that title and saying, I'm going to be a past grand.
Yeah.
Good for him.
Yeah. I really admire him a lot. And him and I were very close. He was heavily involved with DMLA and Rainbow. So, so him stepping out, it was then up to kind of the advancing line at the time of like, well, okay, that's essentially moves everybody up. We all stay in our same positions, but it's next year it'll be, everyone's kind of moved up one chair instead. Yep. And so they brought me in, and I made the joke because I was getting brought in by the Grand Secretary at the time. And I said, hey, last time you brought me in, I ended up with band camp. So this better be good, bud. And I sat down, and they explained it to me, and they said, how do you, we would like to appoint you as, kind of the next guy then. And I said, you got it. They're like, do you want to think about it? And I said, I already did. That's it. Yeah. Let's go. Let's do it. I'm honored. I'm ready to keep working. So
currently you're in what position?
So right now I'm Grand Senior Deacon.
Grand Senior Deacon.
Yep. So I didn't sit junior deacon in my subordinate lodge. I didn't sit grand junior deacon in Grand Lodge. So,
Okay. So in Nebraska, senior deacon, junior warden, senior warden, do you do a deputy grand master?
yep.
Okay. So gotcha.
Yeah.
Kansas. So
Yeah. The deputy also ends up being the Grand Master elect too. So it's like when you're elected a deputy Grand Master, you're in. Yep.
unless you just get smoked and do something stupid.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Which happens sometimes.
Oh, we had a conversation about that off camera, that self-policing. You know what? I'll just kind of let everyone in. We'll let Eric sit there, not take any smoke. We all talk about guarding the West Gate, about people coming in, right? And that's just, oh, well, we're not guarding the West Gate. Okay, so let's say this. How many people come in and there were no signs, but they get in and they're just a total turd, and we haven't I think we don't self-police internally. We talk about whispering good counsel. Sometimes you got to shout it because they're not listening. Sometimes you got to grab them by the coat and shake them up a little bit. We all know what I mean there.
Sure.
And just to get them back in line, because that, if your Masonic brother can't tell you, you're not going to listen to anybody. So you might as not be part of the club. So sorry, that's Bird's rant for the moment.
Hey, I'm with you 100%. And you never know too. I mean, so you could also bring somebody in that is doing great. Something happens in their life and turns things. But that's what makes us Masons. That's where we are obligated to do something about that.
When stuff goes, so here's the great thing that people on the outside don't understand about Masonry. You want to talk cults and all that garbage, push all that to the side. I can tell you when, several years ago, more than 5 years ago, when my wife got diagnosed with cancer, my first call was to a Mason. It wasn't to family. My second, third, and fourth call, still Masons. And it's just so, if anybody, my elevator pitch would be this. If you really want to be part of what I refer to as the original bro code, it's Masonry.
It is.
Because even when you're acting a fool, the good ones are going to set you down and say, you need to check yourself, homie.
Yeah.
So, but again,
I think you just made a shirt idea, the original bro code. I like that.
We're the original bro code. It's not trademark. Do what you got to do with it, my friend.
There you go.
So, all right. So if you're elected to the Grand East, what's your number one goal? I mean, you're going to have lots of goals for Nebraska Masonry. What is the one thing you want Nebraska Masonry to accomplish? One thing.
For me, it's really going to be about the education part, about what all of this means. I think that's part of what we have with the way that our standard proficiency is right now, with questions and answers and obligation, but is really helping. So we actually just yesterday had our first in quite a few years, a Masonic Education Symposium. So we had two guys from our Masonic Education Committee do a presentation, and then they asked me to come in to do a guest presentation. And what was really important about that, and a lot of guys had made some comments, was like how important it was to really take the time to grasp everything that they're going through. Something that's missed when we're going from EA to Fellowcraft to Master in 3 weeks.
That a lot of times you're getting fire hosed.
It is a fire hose. And so now, and I likened it, I said, even with standard proficiency or short form, whichever one it is, there is still, the thing is like the degree part is the informing aspect of the information. Whereas everything that happens with your mentor, with when you're working through proficiency, that's the education. Informing and educating are not the same thing.
Exactly right.
So for me, that would be something that I would have. And it, of course, kind of depends on what happens the years before, because maybe something else and I got to shift. But as it is right now, that's something I'm very passionate about. It's what I do for a job with young students.
Right.
But is to really help understand, not only just what do the working tools mean? What does the apron mean? But like, what does that mean outside of the lodge? Exactly. I think sometimes that gets lost as it's really fun to get into the esoterics and the history, and there's a place for that. But I also, as somebody who really I need to understand how this is going to apply in my life.
Right.
Because otherwise, when I'm around all my brothers, I'm going to behave. But when I'm outside, it's harder to do that. What can help me do that is providing that education on what this means and how we can utilize, like one of my favorite sayings that I kind of tell people is like, we don't need the plum. We need what the plum teaches. So
Exactly.
it's like, don't get married to having a plum around all the time, because I hope you're not going around like, oh, am I doing this right? Like,
Right.
no, it's, you need to take what it teaches. So that
Right.
education really would be a big thing for me,
Yeah.
if I get there.
We have so many tools, and whether it's Masonic or not, we just don't always know how to use the tools. And everyone's Masonic journey is different. What you think your masonry looks like is different than what my masonry looks like. And
Yeah.
that's the great thing about it. It's we
Hmm.
can go in all these different lanes. And if you say, I'm looking for this, masonry has this, masonry has that too. I promise you, they've got whatever you're looking for in masonry,
Hmm.
have it.
Yeah.
We have it. If you just want to take the time and educate yourself, we've got
Yeah. Absolutely. And that's something I harp on people a lot too, is like just paying attention. If you're going to just sit on the sideline for a degree, I know sometimes, you know what, maybe it's the 70th time you've seen the fellowcraft degree, but you know what? Just pay attention, watch. How is it making you feel, and
Yep.
what's that process that's going through? And I think that's where we can really learn to even further appreciate the craft and everything that it offers us.
Yeah, I agree. So I tell people similar when they come in and you're watching degree work, don't sit in the same spot. Sit on different parts of the room because when you hear it differently and it hits you because maybe you're seeing the back of a candidate versus the front or a side.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
we all know, huh? You guys thought you're going to catch me slipping. We all know that there's something different, and all of the angles, huh? You see what I did there? All of the angles make a difference, right?
Yeah. Absolutely.
So,
Absolutely. Like the and that was one of the things I teach whenever I do like educate, like Mercer has an education presentation before every business meeting. We usually do it during dinner, so that way it's not taking up precious time during the meeting. But one of the other things that I talk to people about is that, like, Masonry teaches us the things so that we can go out into the world and do them. So that way the community stuff is because of what we do as Masons. It
sure.
encourages us and teaches us how to do those things, or to help the youth, or to help organizations fundraise that maybe they don't have the ability to do so. So it's like Masonry isn't in the lodge. Masonry is everything. It's
Yep.
everywhere. Yeah.
Yep. I agree. I agree. So, segue there, masonry's everywhere. We know when we're in, this will always be a part of my life. I
Mhm.
will never not be in unless I just do some stupid shit that gets me bounced, but I won't leave on my own, right?
Mhm.
Why aren't more men joining today?
I think so. I know that there is actually still the mystique of, like, you're not allowed to ask, that you got to be that,
Um,
or that you have to, it could go both ways. It's like you're not allowed to ask, or you have to wait for them to ask you. And like,
really?
so I think there's some misinformation, which, surprise, I don't know, not to sound like a one trick pony, but it's like, that's where some education could really help the general public about how this works. And doing community stuff makes a big difference too. But
That's, yep.
um, I think we also saw a lull in membership for a long period of time, because we did get some big increases from the wars, because you had guys coming
And then
back.
we got complacent.
Yeah, right. And so what happened too, though, was like we get this big jump of guys, and now all we're doing right now is initiating, passing, and raising guys over and over and over and over and over. And then, like, all of a sudden,
Yep.
where's the time to do community stuff? Where's the
Yep.
time to do fundraising, or social events for that matter? And I think once that slowed down, there wasn't anybody left to kind of do that, because they were just used to doing one thing in particular, and so engagement kind of disappears. And when engagement disappears and you don't really have much of a presence out in your local community or at all, then how are you going to get people to be interested and want to be part of that organization as it is? So I think right now it's starting to actually trend a little bit upward. I think guys are really starting to look for meaning, especially in a very
Yep.
confusing and frustrating world right now, whether that's in physical space or in the digital space.
Yep.
But I think that lull really came from kind of a recovery of, like, okay, we have to figure this out because we're losing things. But I think a lot of that loss came from a lack of engagement.
Sure.
Just like I said, with, like, I went through the degrees and I was having a wonderful time. And then all of a sudden they're like, yeah, no, we don't, more or less don't need you right now. I'm like, well, then why should I show up?
You should be putting the new guys to work. Those
Yes.
are the ones you have to, like, let's keep going, keep going. The ball's rolling.
Yeah, we had a guy come actually, so he had been a Mason for 10 years. And then one day he shows up to a degree. I had no idea who this guy was. And at first, one of our junior deacon at the time goes, I think some homeless guy just came in off the street.
Oh my
And I was
God.
like, well, where is he? He's like, oh, he's upstairs. Like, you didn't think to talk to him first? So
You just
I
let
like,
him walk in?
yeah, because we have like a 2-story thing. So I'm like going upstairs and he's putting on an apron. I'm like, oh, well, he's probably okay. Then I'm like, hey, I'm like, how are you? And he's like, oh, I'm doing all right. And I'm like, so what lodge are you a member of? And he's like, oh, I'm a member of this lodge. And I asked his name and he said it. And I was like, I was secretary at the time. And I was like, oh yeah, I recognize that. I was like, hey, it's good to see you.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden he just started coming around all the time. And I finally said, I was like, hey, brother, why are you here? And he's like, first of all, he's like, my wife said I needed to go find something to do. So I
Okay.
was just sitting at home because he had to stop working. He had brain surgery and all this stuff. And
Good for her.
I was like, cool. And I was like, do you care if we put you to work and get you in a chair and get you working and you can help with the community? He goes, no, I work best when I have something to do. And I'm like, perfect.
Love it.
And even our new guys, they get in. So when we have an EA come through and he's ready to go, he's doing really well, and we have an entered apprentice practice, or same thing, we have a fellowcraft practice, I'll put him in steward. Hey, you already know the lines.
Yeah.
Do you want to come? Then they're like, yeah, they're like, I can. And I'm like, yes, you can. So it's like, and my thing too with that like engagement part is like, let them tell you no.
Exactly.
They'll tell you, hey, you know what? This isn't my thing. I like the community stuff. All right, cool.
Be assumptive.
Yeah. You have to kind of have your lodge really should have something a little bit. I don't want to say something for everybody because it's not that broad, but like some guys want to do community, some guys want to do social, some guys want to do ritual, some guys
But
want to
that's
do a
what
mix
your
of those.
committees in your lodge should be
Right.
identifying.
Yes, exactly. And that's where I think gets some of it. It takes a little bit of work. It takes a little bit of organization to be able to like line up those things. But I think that, having at least a committee head for each one of those particular aspects of Masonry is really important because that's how you're going to keep your guys engaged.
Yeah. Well, you're right. So our lodge, when I was master, I don't know how many committees we had, 12 or 13.
Mm-hmm.
4 or 5 I really paid attention to. And the other 8. So if I were to do it all over again,
Mm-hmm.
every committee at least once a quarter would report. And there would be some accountability because you never know if that one committee, the guy's like, oh, well, Bird put me ahead of a committee, but we do nothing. Well, that's not inspiring. I just stuck him in a dud spot. So yeah, to your point, there's something for most. There's something for nearly everyone.
Right. So we take our name, our Worshipful Master this year. He actually came up with this brilliant idea. So the Grand Lodge mandates that all subordinate lodges at least have, membership, education, that kind of thing.
Yep.
So we took our name, Mercer, and we turned that into an acronym. So we have membership, education, ritual, community, economics, refreshment.
I love it.
Every month we run the Mercer report. Each guy that's in charge of each one of those things. And it's not a committee because the idea is that one guy's in charge. He pulls in people who need, because sometimes people want to be part of different things. I'm part of ritual and community. So I'm in too, but we give reports on that. And to your point, yes, there has to be, that's accountability.
Yeah.
There has to be some accountability there. And it works wonders for us because we do have aspects to all of that sort of thing.
Genius. I love it. I love it.
Good.
It's really great. So this is kind of an interesting, I'm gonna take you a direction. So bear with me. So there's a lot of talk in Masonry. All bodies are struggling, right? And it's been on the table for the shrine about, do we get rid of the prerequisite? At one time, the Scottish Rite, New York Rite, to be a shrine, you had to have the prerequisite, and everyone's like, all right, let's just get them in, volume. So there seems to be a big push to make it easier for men to become master masons. Okay. So what do you think that pulse is for Nebraska Masons from your perspective? This is a push everywhere.
Yep. So we were, for the longest time, we were what we refer to as full form. So that's questions and answers with the obligation.
Yep.
In most jurisdictions, that's kind of like the first lecture-ish, whatever. But so we were that for a really long time. And I think it was about 1986 or so, somewhere in the 80s it was, that we switched to what was referred to as short form, which was just basically, like I said, I mean, you're talking 10 lines, maybe tops, which means you'd memorize 5 or 6, something like that. So that lasted all the way up until at the 2019 annual communication in February, we went back to full form, and we've been there since. Now, there have been some instances where short form has tried to come back in various ways. But it never passed. So we've still been with full form. So I think, and I understand, because the initial thing when we're seeing our numbers drop. So right now we have about 6,600 Master Masons in Nebraska,
Okay.
and yeah, there used to be a time when there was 30,000, and then even somewhat recently there were 10,000. You got to think about deaths and suspensions. So the big thing that when we were talking about, like, the idea behind, like, what not only what's causing it, but how do we stop the bleeding? You're never going to have like the perfect year. Like, it's just not going to happen. Like, things are always going to be that way.
Yep.
But what we noticed was that there were members that were going SNPD, suspended non-payment of dues, within 3 years. So it's like, you think they get raised that first year, and you know what, maybe we'll let it slide for year 2, but then year 3, hey man, you got to pay your dues, and if you don't, okay, well, we're going to suspend you, and then they go suspended. So that was happening a lot. So we were suspending hundreds of guys each year that were fitting in that category. And so the concept was, okay, are guys just not getting, we were talking about the engagement situation, are they just not getting the experience that they were hoping to get?
Yeah.
And because that's important in anything that you do, kind of like, what are your goals? What are you looking at?
Well, when you're giving up your commodity, your most precious commodity, time. Yeah, for sure.
You're giving up time. Yeah, it has to be worth your time. And so the idea was, with full form, is, okay, we're going to create an experience here. So now it's important that the lodge now provides each guy that comes in with a mentor. And you know what? We're not asking you to be Mr. Miyagi.
Right.
Just sit down with the guy, and so he can learn questions and answers. And then that way he has somebody that he can ask, hey, why do you guys use this word instead of this word? Or what does this mean? Or what does that mean? And it becomes beneficial for the both of you, and you create a nice relationship. And now there's also an investment being made. So you're not being made a Master Mason in a month. I mean, it's happened here and there. Some guys are just, at Mercer recently, we actually just did a fellowcraft last Tuesday. And just yesterday at the education symposium, he's like, well, I got it memorized already. I was like, sheesh, nice work, dude. But usually it takes a little bit of time. It just depends on everybody's
learning. You got those savants, though.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So, but now it's like there's a time investment. And now, in between that space, in between their entered apprentice and their fellowcraft, they can go travel. Hey, there's another EA degree happening down the street. Let's go together so you can see what this looks like now without the hoodwink on. Like, going through that, like, now it's, instead of the goal being a Master Mason, the minute you get initiated, the journey is the goal.
Exactly right.
And that turns that whole process into the goal. Now, I understand that when we look at it and they're like, well, how many Master Masons did we raise? And I would argue, I don't think that's the point anymore. They'll get there. We'll get them there. We have to work together, and we have to be able to help these guys along the way. And maybe sometimes it means we can't take guys in as fast as we would like.
Yeah.
But you help them along the way, and now they're more invested. They're less likely to go, suspended for non-payment of dues because
they put in all this time for the work to, like, there's no way. Yeah.
All this time and the work. And now the other concern that comes up is, this is really hard. I can't memorize. I'm not very good. So it is at the discretion of the master to decide.
Same with
and it really comes down to, is like, as a master, does it sound like he understands what he learned? It's okay if he can't get all the words right, and it's
but he's got the essence of it.
But he gets it, and it's like, yeah, then okay. Now we're trusting you as Masons, and our duties and obligations, that you're not just saying, well, I get to decide, and so whatever, just move them on. So, but that kind of answers that question too. But we've even incentivized guys to, if they do really, really well, in terms of like very few mistakes on the questions and answers, we have a Grand Master's Proficiency Coin. It's a beautiful coin for all 3 degrees. I brought one here with me. They're really nice.
Oh, I see the stairs, and
that's the fellowcraft.
Nice.
And then the lion's paw on the back for the Grandmaster.
Okay, I got you.
But it's a pretty hefty coin. But
it looks substantial.
Yeah, if you do really well, a Grand Lodge officer will come out, listen to it, and they will award you the coin. It's because it's an award. It's not a prerequisite. Right. And the beautiful thing too is, like, Now we've opened up to anybody. If you haven't learned questions and answers, and now you have, but you've done really well, we'll give you a coin. We'll reward you for that type of work. So
People love that too. They can show that off a
yeah,
little bit. They get to
it
spend
is.
on the table. I get it.
We like to have a little bit of incentive, and sometimes it's neat to get
Well, and
rewarded for
listen,
things.
Masons love swag, and I'm just
Oh
glad it's
yeah.
not another damn lapel pin. So,
Yeah. I had to go
oh,
buy a box to actually like put all my pins in. I was like, this
oh
is
my
getting out of
gosh. I feel like we're going to have to go back to the 70s wide lapels to cover all the damn pins.
hand. That's
Crazy.
right. But yeah, so so for now, what we've seen, so this year we actually suspended the least amount of members that we have suspended in years.
Wow.
Less than 200 members.
Wow.
And it was a huge improvement. And we're starting to see some of these guys that have gone through this full form. They're starting to go up the chairs of, of officers. Sometimes they get skip just depending on what, lodges look like and their lines and whatnot. But now again, like you don't have when you know the questions and answers too, you don't have to panic as you're going up the line because you know a lot of what is kind of required.
Yep.
And then we started opening up. We have a Deputy Grand Custodian apprentice school. So there's some guys that are going through to learn how to become a Deputy Grand Custodian apprentice. Deputy Grand Custodians in our jurisdiction, basically they're the guys that are in charge of the work. We have a Grand Custodian who's in charge of the whole state of Nebraska. Then he's got deputies. Almost all the Grand Lodge officers are Deputy Grand Custodians, but their job is to really kind of help facilitate the ritual and do examinations and stuff like that. But now we have an apprentice school. So we've offered these like schools of like, this is a way that you can learn on how to do this if you really want to take it further.
Right.
As opposed to just like maybe trying to figure it out yourself in some way.
Right.
So I get it. And I think I understand that, hey, we need to make it easier for Master Masons because then we can get more Shriners, we can get more Scottish Rite, more York Rite, all that stuff. Look, I'm part of Scottish Rite. I'm part of, Royal Arch and Cryptic Council. I get it. And I completely understand that our response is to want to go to numbers. But I think we have to stop the bleeding first. We stop the bleeding first. We give a meaningful experience to these guys. Yep. Then they're going to be able to, on their own free will and accord, be like, okay, yeah, I want to give a little bit more. I mean, so what happened with me, I was like, I saw Rainbow and I'm like, I'm really enjoying this. Like, how do I go and do this, do more of this? And I don't know that I necessarily would have had that experience without a little bit more Masonic education and participation and engagement.
Yeah, you're right. And let me add in,
mm-hmm.
I would challenge your stubbornness because, and this is why I say that, you had the experience and like, okay, there's nothing else for you to do. That's where lodges lose members. You are unique when it comes to that. Not the anomaly, but unique. Because a lot of people, when they feel like that I'm in, I want to engage, and they don't allow me to engage, screw it. I'm out. I'm going to go. So thank God that you did what you did and you found your path, because it's up to the lodges as much as it is anything. So whether you go all the way in one day or chance to advance, how a lot of it's up to the lodge to keep the guys engaged. That's not a Grand Lodge issue. That's a lodge issue. And I will debate anybody on that anytime. Come on the channel, debate me, because if your lodges aren't providing that experience for their time, I'm out. Now, the other thing that I would encourage anybody that's watching this podcast, whether you're soon to be coming in as a Mason or you're a current Mason and you're just, I feel like, oh, it's just not there for me. Go visit other lodges. Because just because Lodge A isn't doing it for you, give Lodge B, C, or D a chance. There's all sorts of other options. And it may be like at our lodge, it takes a long time to get on a line, and it's a 10-year progressive because there's not a lot of hopping around. So, but that's not for you at our lodge. And if you're like, I want to come in and in the next 3 years, next 5 years, I'd love to be master. Let me show you the other 8 in our area that they would love to have you.
Yeah.
But my question also be, why would you want to be a master? Usually the ones that aren't the great ones. It's the ones that are like, I don't know if I want to do this. Right?
That's what happened to me in 2019. Cause like the guy I was real close with, he had to step out cause he was having a kid. Well, his wife was having a kid. His family was having a kid.
Right.
And then it was like, well, we got to move everybody up one. Cause I was originally just going to be junior warden. I was like, oh boy. I'm like, guys. But then I was like, okay, because they're like, what else we're gonna do?
I think you're the one though, Eric, that if you have too much time to think about it, it's no good. We just got to throw you in and let you say, let's go. Because you might overanalyze and like, screw it, just go and do it, man. Do you?
Yeah, I've been a victim of my own analysis paralysis that I've learned to
Dang,
like
yeah.
the beauty is to try to have as clear of a mind as possible because then it's
Organic.
like just real quick. And you know what? We at some point too, we got to trust our ability to adapt. It's like you go into it and you make a mistake. Okay, just fix it and move
Yeah,
on.
so many people when they're working on the lines are, oh my gosh, I did great. I missed 4 words. Great. You didn't miss 7.
Yeah,
Or you didn't
exactly.
miss 5. Why do you care? You did
Yeah.
great because nobody else had the sack to get up and do it. Great. I'm glad you did.
Right. And that's exactly right. Like you know, when one of the kids I mentor, he's working on his individual proficiency. And like, sometimes, you know, he's like, well, he's like, I think, and it was like, you did good. It's okay, man. Like, this isn't easy. Like, it is difficult. You're memorizing thousands of words. You're
Thousands.
doing a great job, man. Like,
Yeah.
just even doing it is a great job. Now about like the one thing I do want to also mention about with the whole like making it easier. So the narrative originally was like make it easier to join, and I kind of argued like it's not harder to join. Like, first
Right.
of all, we should be guarding the west gate, so we should be doing our due diligence with guys for sure.
Yeah.
But then the argument sometimes would come up as like, well, it's too the proficiency is too hard. Nobody's going to want to do that. And I said, you got to let them decide that.
Yep.
Let them decide that. And
Yep.
then the last thing was that you were talking about how, like, you know, if your lodge isn't engaging guys, that's not the Grand Lodge's problem. I agree with that. But our Grand Lodge, we've actually been talking about like, what are ways that we can create, maybe instead of, you know, we have proficiency schools or schools of instruction for ritual. Maybe we can have a school of instruction on how to do a fundraiser or how to do community events. Or like how to have officer meetings or what it's like to run these things.
They
We
should
have,
be all on a platform just like this too. So
yeah,
someone can go and set there. You know what? I'm like,
right.
our committee needs to look at this.
Yeah, and that's something we started looking at, and we are like, it would be great to have this library of stuff of some of
Absolutely.
the more obscure things of like, you know, because yeah, it's like I don't know how to do a fundraiser, but it's like we'll figure it out. But it's like if you have a little bit of help,
Here's
or
your
maybe even
toolkit.
somebody to talk to about it,
Yep.
it's perfect. Yeah, absolutely.
I agree. Yeah, and I think that Masonry historically we have not always embraced technology, and
Mm,
I think as we do this more, even with simple things like a podcast or social media, this will be the thing. Not only will it help awareness for what we do, but it can make a little bit of a smoother transition because everyone has different learning styles, and
mhm.
I think that we have a variety of options if we just embrace them all.
Yeah, yeah, you have to, because guess what? That's just how it is.
It's just how it is. I mean,
Hmm.
that's so. We're going to go to the most important question of the podcast. So if you've seen the episodes before, we bring out 4 things and one must go forever. So we try to make it a little something that it may fall into your wheelhouse. So up on the screen, my friend. See, everyone thinks they're ready until they're not. On the screen, you will see 4 drummers. And for the non-drummers out there, let me educate. You've got Dave Grohl, who was original drummer for Nirvana. You've got Lars from Metallica, Phil Collins, brother Phil, also a drummer. I know you think of him just as Phil Collins, but before, he's everyone knows the most famous drum riff out there. If you've watched The Hangover, that's in there as well, but it's in a lot of episodes. And then you got the big dog, no pun intended, Tommy Lee. So of all of these drummers, one has to go forever. The dude was never born. That means that band might have failed or bands. Who's got to go? You can dissect this any way you want, Eric,
Yeah.
but I told you, not always going to be easy.
Well, I appreciate that none of these are my favorite drummers, so I'm not hurting any of my favorite drummers' feelings.
Gotcha.
Now, Dave Grohl, I have to keep Dave Grohl because like he's Dave Grohl, and also like he made Foo Fighters. I'm
Exactly.
sorry, but like, and Nirvana was pretty rad.
Yeah.
Phil Collins is one of the goats. Like
Yeah.
you gotta keep him now. So I'm between Lars and Tommy now. I can't stand Lars. He's
As a
not.
person, I think he's a prick.
Oh, he's so bad. He's so bad. But the thing is like, is Metallica without Lars? And there was this moment. So one of my favorite bands, Avenged Sevenfold, when their drummer died, they brought in Mike Portnoy from Dream Theater. And ultimately, he recorded a record, went on tour, but they were like, hey, we can't be Avenged Sevenfold and Mike Portnoy. Like, you have to be kind of part of the group. Like, you're such an icon. You're so different. So I think about like, they could bring in some of the most incredible drummers, but it wouldn't really be Metallica. So is it Lars, in a sense, is a necessary evil? So I'm sorry, but Tommy's got to go.
So
I also can't stand the flashiness of Tommy.
yes, so I like the logic there, and anybody else could have drummed right for the crew, but Tommy. But so if Tommy wasn't a drummer, that means he wouldn't be born. I mean, the guy could go do other things in life. He could probably now do some OF. I mean, there's just some other things Tommy could do.
Yeah, for sure,
But I kind of like the rationale. I put that up there, and I tried to do my deductive reasoning. I ended up with Tommy. I almost popped out Lars just because he's kind of a punk.
Yeah.
But to your point, Metallica is not Metallica without Lars. Anybody could have filled in for Tommy. And I'd argue for all of the crew. I mean, they could have popped some people.
Really? Yeah.
Guns N' Roses, it's hard to get rid of Axl, right?
Yep.
They've just not been the same, and he's such a prima donna too, but I don't want to make this all about music. So Eric, thank you for jumping on the Old Fashioned Masonic podcast, my friend. I appreciate you. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you so much.